before we dive into sports today, we do have an announcement, and this has been a moment that I've dreaded since word became official. Something that has been on my mind a lot for quite a while, and now's the time to discuss it. Chris Duncan is taking a permanent leave from the turn to focus on his health. It is something that I think Dan and a lot of people here at 101 knew that it was something that probably was going to happen after Dunk made the announcement last April that he was going to kind of take a temporary leave. I know many of you have asked for updates on Dunk, especially with us at 101 celebrating our 10-year anniversary. A lot of social media stuff has come out, and as Wheeler noted in the crossover, with Randy sending out a very nice tweet around New Year's about the 10-year celebration, you've asked how Chris Duncan has been. And those that have interacted with me, those that know me, know that I respond to pretty much anybody and everybody on social media. I enjoy the interaction, whether it's negative or positive. I like to talk to you guys, and I have seen your requests for updates on Dunk. I've seen the, hey, we wish there was more updates, and this is the time that we decided at 101 that this was appropriate. And for me now, and I do want to compose myself here because it is emotional, it's a tough day, but I want to do this right, and I want to do it justice. So early last April, Dunk made the announcement that he was going to be stepping away from the show. He needed to focus on his health. And then over the last 9 months, we have had a rotation of co-hosts on the turn. And whether it's Jen Langosh or Mark Saxon or Michael Young or Kerry Davis or Nick Wagner, I mean, everybody stepped up and did their part, and they were fantastic and professional, just like, we knew that they would be. But we wanted to keep Dunk's chair open. That's Dunk's chair. It was Dan, me, and Dunk that were put together for this show in 2013. And we did not want, until Dunk basically gave us official word, for anybody else to fully occupy that chair. It's Dunk's chair. So now, with this more permanent, the update basically is that he's still fighting. He's still fighting brain cancer. He's still fighting this tumor. And I knew it was different this time around. When I was a producer of the Fast Lane, when Dunk initially came down with the news that he had a brain tumor and he'd be fighting cancer, it felt different. It was something that you knew because of Dunk's temperament and because you knew this guy fights his ass off constantly, that this tumor stood no chance. And even when the tumor came back this second time around, I still felt that way, but it was different. It took more out of Dunk the second time around. And, for those that don't know, that tumor came back well before he made the announcement last April. It was, like I said, it was early April when he made the announcement, but that stupid thing came back months prior to that. And Dunk, because he did not want to let us down, he did not want to let you, the listener, down. He didn't want to let anybody down on 101. He was dealing with another brain tumor while doing the show. I don't know how he did it. I don't know how to sit there and watch, the beloved Cardinals or the beloved Blues or deal with the Rams crap, for him to be fighting cancer at the same time of prepping for a show. And around the same time that he made the announcement back in April that he was going to have to take kind of a temporary leave, or what we thought was going to be a temporary leave, my son, who was only 2 months old at the time, was at Children's Hospital, and he was dealing with a infection that required him to be at Children's Hospital for 15 straight days. And during that time, it was all consuming. It was all my wife Kristen could think about. It was all I could think about. It was all, it was tough. And this is my son. For Dunk to deal with brain cancer during the same time. I don't know. I just don't know how he was able to do a radio show. But the day before he made that announcement, because when Chris made the announcement that he came on 101, he said, "Hey, I got to concentrate on my health here." That was the same day we found out that he was doing that. We didn't know that weeks prior, months and prior. But Duncan and I had a conversation that previous day, and I could just tell the weight of the world was on him, and to go through treatment, to be on chemo, to do the back and forth between home and the doctor's office, trying to stay positive, trying to stay upbeat, trying to fight this thing, and then to also do a radio show, it was too much this time. And I encouraged him. I said, you don't owe anybody anything here. You don't owe me anything. You don't owe Dan anything. You don't owe 101 anything. You don't owe bosses here anything. Concentrate on you. And I think he had a conversation with his wife Amy and his dad, Papa Dunk, his brother Shelly. I think he went home and had a conversation that day. And he ultimately decided that he needed to give his full attention to beating this thing again. And over the past 9 months, we have tried to keep in contact as much as possible with Dunk, with also understanding that he's going through a lot and we want to make sure that he has his privacy. Every single time, we'll get a thumbs up emoji, or he won't discuss what he's actually dealing with, and that's Chris Duncan. But having updates through Amy recently, we know that the tumor is back. We know that he is undergoing another round of treatment. And I don't want to be PC or whatever, but if you pray for Dunk, pray for his family. If you don't, keep him in your thoughts. Know that at 37 years old or whatever it is, this is something that fortunately not a lot of us have to deal with, but he does. So, again, if you're just tuning in, you're confused, Dunk is taking a permanent leave from the show. It's not the right time to discuss what's next for this time slot or this show or this era or whatever it is. Because, truth be told, we're not going to be able to replicate that show. We're not going to be able to replicate the turn. And Dan will tell you, Dunk and I butted heads. Butted heads a lot. Butted heads creativity, with creativity. We butted heads on segment ideas and show ideas and opinions. But we also laughed our asses off constantly. And that's what made the show work. I can't replicate that. Dan can't replicate that. And on a personal level, I was a producer from out of town in St. Louis. Chris Duncan is why a lot of you listeners came to like me, came to listen to me. He was the one that kind of paved the way to say, hey, give this guy a shot. So I owe more to Chris Duncan than he'll ever know. I love the guy. I'm praying for him. I hate that he's going through this. But I'm also somewhat relieved that the decisions have been made for him to fully step away and to concentrate on this thing, because it really does need his full attention. And whatever happens with this show, whatever happens with me or Dan or whatever, we get to that later. But Chris Duncan will always be part of our family, and not just the Turn family, the 101 ESPN family. You drive around, you listen to all our shows, whether it's the Fast Lane or Wheeler or Bernie in the Morning. How many times do you hear Chris Duncan used to say this, or Chris Duncan has said this, or don't forget about, Dunk told me this one time. His shows, everything that is Chris Duncan is woven into the fabric of 101, and that's not going anywhere. I pray, I really do, I pray that last April was not our last show. But at the time that we were kind of doing it, if I'm honest, part of me was like, this might be it. this might be it. This might be our last show. And 9 months later, that still may be the case. So there's your update. I do apologize that this, you weren't necessarily kept up to date constantly, but we wanted to make sure that Dunk had his privacy, and we wanted to make sure that Dunk was doing everything to concentrate on his health, and it wasn't a situation where he had to answer us or answer for the show or answer when he was coming back. So I know all of you understand that. I do. And he loved doing this show. He loved talking to you. He loves baseball, and he loves, the interaction. And he's a fighter. The guy's relentless. And I learned more about baseball from Chris Duncan than anybody else in the world. But much more than that, I learned what real determination is, and real fight, and real focus. Because once he set his mind to something, man, whether it's learning the outfield in baseball, winning a championship at any level, or doing radio, the guy did it right. And toward the end, he knew he couldn't give it his all because of what was going on. So, again, we'll update you throughout the course of the show. Chris Duncan is taking a permanent leave here from the Turn, and I don't know what's next for the Turn, but we'll get to that at a more appropriate time. For now, it's about Dunk. And I'm not looking at the text line. I'm not looking at Twitter right now, but anybody that wants to share something, I'm sure Dan can read off your text throughout the course of the show, and we'll talk about sports. There's no easy transition here. Although Chris Duncan loved Nick Foles, absolutely loved Nick Foles. Told me last year he was going to win a Super Bowl. I didn't believe him. Told me he was the pride of Arizona. Didn't believe him. And Nick Foles has got the Eagles to the next flipping round. And I'm sure if Dunk was watching, he's probably like, I told Stalter that. I told Stalter that Nick Foles was going to do it again. So we'll talk football today. We'll talk Blues. Give you some baseball updates. But that's your update. And again, we'll kind of address a lot of that moving forward. So there you have it. All right, more here next on 101 ESPN.